social nonprofit initiative by the think tank AlterContacts to help small businesses and self-employed professionals overcome the challenges of the pandemic and reactivate the economy. My name is Diana George, and I'm the local interview host in the UK. And today our guests are Luke McAllister, the founder of the sustainable fashion platform called Minimal, and his co-founder, Maria Vasileva. Nice to have you here both today. How are you?
Good, thanks, Diana. Good to be here.
Good to have you. So I know the company very well because I worked with Luke and Maria on a startup, and I know what a great initiative it is and what amazing things you guys are trying to achieve. But can you, Luke, tell me a little bit about what the business does, where you located, and how you really came around to this idea?
Sure, yeah. So as a little bit of a background, for the last 6 or 7 years, have been working in e-commerce, mainly for high street fast fashion retailers in the UK, really designing products that were very commercially successful. But something didn't sit right with me in that we were creating great products that made people buy more and more things that they didn't necessarily want or need, that were ending up in landfill, exploiting people in the third world in order to produce them for lower and lower prices. And all of this was causing massive negative externalities. And over the last few years, I started to think about how we could apply some of those technologies in terms of personalization and data to drive more sustainable customer behavior. And obviously a lot of that comes down to transparency. So knowing scientific data around an item's carbon impact, how the workers are being treated, whether there's any charitable initiatives that companies are doing to really give customers a clear view of the impact they're having when they consume products, because everything we consume has an impact, no matter what it is. It's just figuring out how much of an impact we have and to start driving consumer behavior, which is more conscious about what you're buying and what you're wearing in our case, because we're starting off with fashion. So put a little bit more simply, our kind of initial product launch, which is upcoming, and we'll come on to that a bit later, is a marketplace for sustainable fashion brands to allow them to, first of all, compete on the sustainable performance of their clothing. So we've developed a data system which we believe gives the customer a good picture of the impact of everything they buy. So they're able to compare and contrast one product to another within the platform, but also to base product recommendations on a customer's requirements. What styles do they like? What their size and fit requirements? What budget do they have? Because we believe that sustainability shouldn't be exclusive. So we want to personalize the platform to allow people to participate in this kind of journey towards sustainability who don't necessarily have high budgets to buy really premium items, which is at the moment, the sustainable fashion industry is slightly skewed towards that more luxury end. So it's just using technology to try and solve a lot of those problems in sustainability. And obviously we're just at the beginning, but we're about 2 months from launch. And yeah, I'll hand over to Maria for a little bit more on that.
Yeah, I joined Luke a little bit later during the pandemic. My background is mostly with big corporates, the likes of Google and Twitter, where I spent 10 years. But I also had a stint at a few scale-ups, which gave me a first-hand experience working in a startup environment. And obviously I got very excited about the idea Luke was working on. My experience is quite diverse. So I worked in digital marketing, customer success, operations, new product launches, you name it. And at Minimal now, I'm looking after marketing, customer, and business development strategy. As a company at the moment, we have 4 people. We just doubled the size. I recruited 2 new team members, which is really, really exciting. And we're based in London, UK. But actually, we're building a global company. Yeah, that's it.
That's amazing. What a great initiative. And obviously it's such a hot topic at the moment with sustainability. And I would imagine that during the lockdown, people came around to appreciate it more and to understand how important it is to be sustainable and what really matters. Do you think it's the case? Is that kind of the feedback you're getting, that pandemic actually affected people's thinking more towards sustainability?
Absolutely. I think the very real sense of what a global disaster can mean has kind of focused and sharpened people's attention towards other big issues such as climate change and sustainability more generally. And that doesn't just include climate change and waste and plastics. It's also, how do we sustain a world that is more equal? Because the way we've been doing things exploits certain communities in certain parts of the world discriminately. So we believe, and a lot of our kind of customer research and market research has backed that up, that people are really starting to think about what impact they have on these wider global threats.
Sure.
Can I add something? I think also for customers, it was a journey into e-commerce, right? There was a growth of this channel, which resulted in a lot of returns, and a lot of our audience, our customers, started thinking about the impact these returns have on the climate change.
Sure, that's interesting. So obviously the pandemic affected every single business out there, I would say. And especially for a startup, I would imagine it was quite a challenge starting, because you guys started just around when the pandemic started, I think. So what were your major challenges and how did you solve and overcome them?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, first of all, having started the company in February last year, just as the pandemic was starting to hit, fear was the biggest impact at the beginning. Having just quit my permanent job and left my old career behind, I started to see a lot of the fallback options that I'd taken for granted disappearing, colleagues losing their jobs in the industry, which is obviously very sad. And yeah, I think just that kind of confidence in the longevity of my position was the first impact. And luckily we've been able to navigate that. But obviously it was a crazy time, and just that kind of atmosphere, starting a new business without an income in that atmosphere was quite challenging. But in terms of the business, I think collaboration suffered a bit, because I think face-to-face contact is really important, especially in those early stages when you're trying to flesh out ideas and really think deeply about the customer experience, and really harness innovation. And doing that remotely is much more difficult, and we've to a greater or lesser extent overcome those challenges. But yeah, I believe it would have been a lot easier if we could have had more face-to-face time.
Sure.
Yeah, I think business development and partnerships, the same issue. So we've spent much of the last 6 months with Maria heading that up, contacting and building partnerships with sustainable fashion brands, which we've managed to do successfully, as Maria, I think, will come on to. But I don't think you can substitute that face-to-face contact when you're building those relationships early on.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And to add another thing as well, as investor conversations, that suffered a bit because it just takes longer to build those relationships with investors compared to before the pandemic. Because before, there were a lot of conferences, meetups, forums, special events in London where you could meet and network. It's not impossible now, but just more time consuming, I would say.
Yeah.
And also, it's probably worth saying, as well as Luke said, we were quite successful building this relationship with partners and brands, sustainable brands, because we're a technology-first company in the build stage. So we haven't been affected as much as many other businesses. Both Luke and I are used to working remotely. And have we launched before the pandemic? It might have been more challenging. But in a way, this pandemic allowed us to focus 100% of our time on perfecting the technology.
Right.
100%
But
agree.
yeah, I totally agree. It's the networking bit, and what could take 5 minutes outside will take half an hour or an hour on Zoom. So I totally hear you. So, and how do you think your customers are doing? Your customers, your clients, and also the competition. And how do you think the whole sector was affected, like sustainability sector, online shopping sector, because you guys kind of combine both of those sectors together? How were they affected by the pandemic?
Yeah, they were affected quite a bit for us. As a UK-based company, it's a bit of a double whammy with Brexit and lockdowns, both affecting supply chains of our brand partners. It's tough both ways for European companies exporting to the UK and vice versa. So we found out in conversations with these brands that they were struggling. And as a nascent company, we actually got a lot of interest from the European brands who are keen to export to the UK. So at the moment, we're trying to navigate the complexity of the new tax regulations. And also some of our brands, they actually produce in the UK, so they're less affected by Brexit. But still, the pandemic really impacted the supply chains outside of the country.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think as well as those kind of negative or those challenges, it's worth mentioning as well that many of our competitors and our brand partners and prospective brand partners have actually seen an increase in sales during the pandemic as e-commerce companies, because what was an already established trend of e-commerce increasing about 2% year on year was just massively accelerated up towards over 10% growth last year, which hasn't gone back down even with the reopening of shops. Well, we'll remain to see. We've just come out of another lockdown, but I think that's here to stay. And I think that e-commerce generally has had a boost from the pandemic. But as we alluded to before, I think also just people becoming more aware of global issues in terms of sustainability has had a positive impact both on the existing brands, but we're also seeing a lot of new brands popping up every day. We find new brands that we're trying to talk to and partner with. And I think that's twofold. I think there's a number of reasons for it. I think first of all, you've got an increase in e-commerce. You've got a lot of people with free time, people on furlough who have started to get a bit more creative and think about what I could do, what's my passion. And for a lot of people, that will involve developing a sustainable fashion brand, which is great. So there's more and more entrants into the market. And yeah, also that increase in e-commerce and that global consciousness of sustainability and the need for it.
And what's in store for the next few months then? What stage are you in right now, guys?
Yeah, so we are on track to launch the first iteration of the product we think at the end of June. So we've signed up a significant number of brands, as we've said. So everything is all geared up towards preparing for the launch. But for me now, it's a case of starting to build out a backlog of product and technology improvements for post-launch. So as I mentioned before, we see ourselves as a technology company, not necessarily a retailer. We want to use technology to solve a lot of these challenges in, first of all, the retail space, but then also how we can use data to provide insights to our brands to identify underrepresented markets, because there's a lot of issues in sustainable fashion at the moment in terms of it being focused very much on a particular audience. And there's many other audiences coming up, over 60s, over 50s, who are becoming much more conscientious about sustainability, and those markets aren't being served. So we want to use our platform to elevate sustainable fashion brands to be able to compete with the mainstream established retailers.
Yeah. And another thing we're working on is preparing a marketing campaign for launch. And hopefully, depending on the COVID situation, we'll organize some pre-launch events in the UK.
Excellent. That sounds amazing and exciting. So what would you say are the 3 things that you need help with as a business?
Wow, quite a few, but first and foremost, it would be an office space. We're actually actively looking for it now. I mentioned before that working remotely is not a problem for us, but we do firmly believe that for a startup, it helps to instigate collaboration and innovation, and it's really important, especially at this stage. Before COVID, we could use quite a few options available for London startups through different programs, but all of them have been closed during lockdown. So we're hoping to get this resolved soon-ish. And at some stage during the lockdown, we even were using university campuses to get some face-to-face time and meetings done, which was really interesting.
Excellent. That's a good place to use.
And yeah, I think other things we, as all startups will probably attest to, is investment is our next goal. So we really believe in our product, so we want to launch it and prove the traction we've been building towards. But then kind of that next phase, we'll be looking for further investment to build out our in-house technology capability, which we'll be looking to start. Well, it's already started, but we want to really ramp that up after we've launched. And then I think in terms of things we need help with, we've already mentioned the kind of post-Brexit import-export issues. That is a real challenge, and it's kind of it's closed off or made it a little bit more difficult. A lot of great relationships I think we could have had, and offerings to customers that we could have offered. So I think that there are definitely solutions out there for these problems, but it's obviously for a small startup, it's a challenge that we need to overcome.
Sure. Well, hopefully the right people hear you out there, and help will come in one way or the other. Well, thank you so much, both of you, Luke and Maria. It's been great having you here. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. Feel free to contact Minimal using the link in the description of the video. I invite you to like this video and subscribe to our channel. On our channel, we have many more insights for you from different countries and business sectors. I invite you to have a look and stay tuned.